She grabbed him by the collar of his 10,000,001 suit, pulled him toward her, and kissed him. Right on the mouth. In the parking lot of the most exclusive restaurant in Gangnam. Under the glow of fluorescent lights, with the cold Seoul wind cutting through the night air, in full view of every single one of his men. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Because the man she had just kissed was Ryu Seo-jin, the most feared mafia boss in Seoul's underworld, a man who had never been touched by a woman in his entire life. Not once. Not a handshake. Not a brush of fingers. Not even his own mother's embrace after he turned 14 and decided that love was a luxury that would get him killed. His men called him the untouchable. His enemies feared even his shadow. And the last person who had dared to lay a hand on him, a drunk businessman at a nightclub 3 years ago who grabbed his shoulder, had woken up in a hospital with 4 broken fingers and no memory of how he got there. But this woman. This 24-year-old black waitress named Sophie Bennett, who didn't know his name, didn't know his reputation, and certainly didn't know the rule, had just done the one thing no human being on earth had ever survived doing. She kissed him. And the most terrifying part? He didn't pull away. He didn't flinch. He didn't signal his men to drag her to the ground. Ryu Seo-jin, the coldest man in all of Korea, stood completely still, and when she finally let go, breathless and wide-eyed at what she had just done, he looked at her with those dark, unreadable eyes, and said 5 words that shook every man in that parking lot to their absolute core. "What is your name, woman?" Now, before I tell you what pushed her to do something that reckless, something that insane, something that would change both of their lives forever, if you're new here, welcome to the family. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications because this story is about to take you on a ride you are not prepared for. Let's get into it. 3 hours before that kiss changed everything, Sophie Bennett was standing in the back kitchen of Lumiere, one of the most exclusive restaurants in Gangnam, pressing a cold rag against her wrist where the hot oil had splashed. Her coworker, Yuna, was leaning against the counter watching her with that look. The worried one. The one Sophie had gotten used to seeing on people's faces when they looked at her life. "Go home," Yuna said quietly. "You're burned." Sophie shook her head. "Rent is due Friday. I'm 200,000 short. I'm not going anywhere." Yuna sighed but didn't argue. She knew Sophie's story. Everyone at Lumiere did. The American girl from Atlanta who came to Seoul on a teaching visa that collapsed 2 weeks after she landed. The program folded. The school shut down. And Sophie, 22 at the time with no family back home, no savings, and a mother she'd buried 3 years earlier, decided to stay. Because going back to what? An empty apartment in a city full of ghosts? So she stayed. She learned Korean. She picked up waitressing shifts at restaurants that served people who spent more on appetizers than she made in a week. She was good at it. She spoke English, Korean, and French. She could charm international clients. She could navigate a room full of powerful men without flinching. Most nights, anyway. Tonight was not most nights. Sophie wrapped the burn on her wrist, fixed her apron, and pushed through the kitchen doors. The dining room was alive. Every table full. Suits and diamonds. The smell of money and expensive cologne. The energy was different tonight though. Heavier. Tighter. Like the air before a thunderstorm. The manager, Mr. Cho, intercepted her before she could reach her section. He was sweating. Mr. Cho never sweated. "Table 12, he said, gripping her elbow. "VIP. Private room. You're serving them tonight." Sophie frowned. "That's Soo-yun's section." "Soo-yun isn't here. You speak Korean better than half the Korean staff, and I need someone who won't fall apart under pressure. These are not regular customers, Sophie. Do not embarrass this restaurant." He didn't explain further, but the fear in his eyes told her everything she needed to know. She picked up the order tablet, checked what had been pre-ordered, and headed toward the private room at the back of the restaurant. She balanced the tray on her good hand. Knocked twice. Slid the door open. And walked into the room that would change her life. 6 men sat around a long black table. 5 were talking, laughing, pouring soju, filling the room with cigarette smoke and loud voices. The sixth sat at the head of the table in absolute silence. He was the first thing she saw. Not because of the way the other men orbited around him, though they did, their bodies angled toward him like flowers toward a dark sun. Not because of his suit, though it fit him like it had been sewn directly onto his body. She noticed him because he was the stillest person she had ever seen. He wasn't checking his phone. He wasn't eating. He wasn't engaging with the conversation around him. He sat with his hands folded on the table, his posture perfect, his face completely empty of expression. Like a painting of a man instead of a man. He was young. Late 20s, maybe 30. Sharp jawline. Black hair pushed away from his forehead. Eyes so dark they looked like they had been carved from obsidian. Beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Sophie steadied herself. Professional smile. Steady voice. Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Sophie, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Your first course will be out shortly. Can I get anyone anything in the meantime? 5 of the 6 looked at her. Curiosity from some. Surprise from others. She was used to this. A black woman in a high-end Korean restaurant always drew looks. She had learned to let them slide off her like water. But one of the men, broad-shouldered with a jagged scar running from his temple to his jaw, looked at her differently. His gaze moved over her body slowly, deliberately, with a grin that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. The man at the head of the table didn't look up at all. The Bordeaux, the scarred man said. 2010, and make sure the glasses are clean. Last time there was a smudge. Sophie nodded. Of course. I'll have that right out. She turned to leave. And the scarred man grabbed her wrist. The burned one. Sophie gasped. Pain exploded up her arm like a lit fuse. His grip was iron, and he was pulling her toward him with that same lazy, entitled grin. You're not Korean, are you? He said, his eyes crawling over her. Where are you from? America? I love American girls. Especially the exotic ones. Sophie's jaw locked. Let go of me. He didn't. He squeezed harder. She could feel the burn underneath the bandage screaming. Sit down, he said. Have a drink with us. Don't be so uptight. I said let go of me. Now. The room went quiet. The other men were watching. Some amused. Some uncomfortable. None of them moved. None of them said a word. Because the man holding her wrist was no Sang-woo, and every person at that table knew that Sang-woo was the right hand of the man at the head of the table. He was protected. He was untouchable by extension. He could do what he wanted. Sang-woo yanked her closer. Sophie stumbled. The tray flew from her hand and hit the floor. Porcelain shattered. Wine glasses exploded against the marble. And in the wreckage of that sound, a voice cut through the room. Not loud. Not raised. Quieter than silence. More dangerous than thunder. Release her. 2 words. That was all it took. Sang-woo's hand froze. The grin died on his face like a candle being snuffed out. He let go of Sophie's wrist so fast his hand jerked backward. The man at the head of the table still hadn't looked up. He was turning a crystal glass between his long fingers, watching the light catch the edges. She is staff, he said, his voice as flat and cold as a frozen lake. Not entertainment. If you are unable to tell the difference, Sang-woo, I will remove your hand at the wrist so that you never make this mistake again. Nod if you understand. Sang-woo nodded. Fast. Forgive me, boss. The man lifted the glass to his lips. Drank. Set it down. The conversation was over. Sophie stood in the middle of shattered porcelain with her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. She looked at him, this stranger who had just stopped her humiliation with 2 words spoken softer than a whisper, and something moved in her chest. Something tectonic. Something irreversible. She dropped to her knees and started picking up the broken glass. Her hands were shaking badly. A shard sliced her finger, and blood bloomed, bright red against white porcelain. She heard a chair scrape against the floor. She looked up. He was standing. He was taller than she expected. 6'1", maybe 6'2". He towered over her, and for the first time, those dark eyes were pointed directly at her. Not through her. Not past her. At her. At Sophie Bennett. As if she were the only person in the room. He extended his hand. Not to touch her. He held out a black silk handkerchief, letting it hang in the air between them like an offering. Like a bridge. For your hand, he said. Sophie stared at the handkerchief. Then at him. Then at the 5 men behind him, every one of whom was watching this moment with expressions she couldn't decode but would later understand were shock, disbelief, and something very close to fear. She took the handkerchief. Their fingers didn't touch, but she saw something flash in his eyes. Quick and bright and gone, like a shooting star in a midnight sky. Thank you, she whispered. He said nothing. He returned to his seat. And the dinner continued as if the world hadn't just shifted on its axis. Sophie served the rest of the meal on autopilot. Her hands did the work while her mind replayed the same moments on a loop. Release her. For your hand. The look in his eyes. The way the air changed when he stood. The way every man in that room shrank in his presence. She felt his awareness of her every time she entered the room. She couldn't see him looking, but she felt it, a heat at the edges of her skin, like standing too close to something burning. By the time the dinner ended and the men began filing out, Sophie was emotionally wrecked and physically exhausted. Her wrist throbbed. Her cut finger stung. Her feet ached. She cleaned the private room, stacked the dishes, and pushed through the back exit into the cool night air. The parking lot behind Lumiere was poorly lit. 3 black SUVs were idling near the curb. Men in dark suits moved between them, loading in, checking phones, speaking in low voices. Sophie leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. She just needed 1 minute. 1 minute of quiet. That's when she heard the voices. Around the corner. Close enough to hear every word. Did you see the way boss looked at her? That was Sang-woo. His voice was unmistakable. Low, rough, still carrying the bruise of being humiliated. Another man responded. The foreigner? The black girl? Keep your voice down. What? It's not like he's going to do anything about it. Boss doesn't touch women. You know that. Sang-woo laughed. Ugly. Bitter. Yeah, well. He sure moved fast tonight, didn't he? For what? Some waitress? Some African girl serving plates? She was pretty though. Pretty doesn't matter when you're that kind of woman. Trust me. He'll forget her by morning. Boss has standards. He's not going to dirty his hands with some foreigner who doesn't even belong here. That kind of woman. Doesn't even belong here. The words hit Sophie like fists. Not because she hadn't heard them before. She had. She'd heard variations of those words in Korean, in English, in the glances of strangers on the subway, in the way shopkeepers followed her around stores, in the way men fetishized her or dismissed her depending on the day. She had built armor against those words. Thick armor. Strong armor. But tonight, after everything, after the burn and the grab and the glass and the blood and the man with the dark eyes who had been the first person in months to look at her like she was human, that armor cracked. Something inside Sophie Bennett broke open. Not into sadness. Into fire. She rounded the corner. The parking lot opened up before her. Sang-woo and 2 men stood near the second SUV. And there, standing alone by the first car, separate from the group, was the man from the head of the table. His coat was buttoned. His hands were in his pockets. He was looking up at the sky as if searching for something that wasn't there. Sophie didn't think. For the first time in her careful, calculated, survival mode life, Sophie Bennett did not think. She walked straight across that parking lot. Her heels clicked against the asphalt. Every man turned to look at her. Sang-woo's mouth opened. The two men beside him stiffened. She reached the man by the car. He turned his head, those dark eyes finding hers, and in the half-second before he could speak, before he could move, before anyone could stop what was about to happen, Sophie grabbed the collar of his 10,000,001 suit with both hands, pulled him down to her height, and pressed her mouth to his. The kiss was hard. Brief. Defiant. It tasted like rage and loneliness, and every time someone had made her feel like she didn't belong. It tasted like, I am here. I exist. I am not that kind of woman. I am this kind of woman. The kind who kisses back. She let go. Stumbled backward. Reality crashed into her like a wave. What did she just do? What did she just do? The parking lot was frozen. Every man stood motionless. Sang-woo's face was white. The two men beside him looked like they had just witnessed a murder. And the man she had kissed, the man whose collar she could still feel crumpled between her phantom fingers, stood exactly where she had left him. Perfectly still. His eyes locked on hers. And then he spoke. What is your name, woman? His voice was low. Not angry. Not cold. Something else entirely. Something she had never heard in any language. Sophie's lips parted. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. Sophie. He held her gaze for 3 more seconds. 3 seconds that felt like 3 years. Then, Sophie. He said it like he was learning a new word. Like he was pressing it into his memory. Like he would never forget it. Sophie turned and ran. Into the night. Down the side street. Past the subway station. She didn't stop until she was 6 blocks away, her back pressed against a brick wall, her chest heaving, her lips still burning, and one thought screaming through her mind on repeat, what have I done? She went home to her tiny apartment in Yeonam-dong. She sat on the edge of her bed. She pressed her fingers to her lips. And she realized she still had his handkerchief in her pocket. She pulled it out. Held it to her face. Breathed in the scent of cedar and rain and something dark and clean that she couldn't name. She didn't sleep that night. Not even for a minute. The next morning, she found an envelope slipped under her door. No name. No note. Just cash. Enough to cover her rent for the next 3 months. Her hands trembled as she counted it. How did he find her address? She had only given him her first name. 1 word. Sophie. And he had found her. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, it made her feel something she hadn't felt since her mother died. Seen. Yuna told her who he was. They were alone in the break room 3 days later, and Yuna's voice dropped to a whisper even though the nearest person was 2 rooms away. Ryu Seojin. Head of the Ryu Syndicate. Korean Mafia, Sophie. The real kind. He controls everything south of the Han River. Clubs. Real estate. The import trade. Half the politicians in this city owe him favors, and the other half owe him money. Sophie said nothing. People say he's killed men with his bare hands, Yuna continued. People say he's never been with a woman. Not once. No girlfriend. No lover. Nothing. They call him the untouchable. No one is allowed to touch him. It's not just a preference, Sophie, it's a rule. A law. The men in his organization enforce it. He doesn't shake hands. He doesn't accept gifts directly. He doesn't do physical contact of any kind. Sophie's hand drifted to the handkerchief in her pocket. I kissed him, she said quietly. Yuna's eyes nearly fell out of her head. You what? After the dinner. In the parking lot. I kissed him. Sophie. Sophie. Are you insane? Do you have a death wish? That man could have you disappeared. He could, he sent me money, Yuna. Enough for 3 months' rent. He found my apartment, and he sent me money. And on the envelope, on the back, in handwriting so neat it looked printed, there was 1 word. What word? Sophie. Yuna stared at her for a long, heavy moment. Then she grabbed Sophie's shoulders. Listen to me. Whatever you are feeling right now, kill it. Bury it. That man is not a fairy tale. He is a nightmare in a beautiful suit. Forget his name. Sophie promised she would. She meant it. She absolutely, completely intended to forget the name Ryu Seojin. And she might have succeeded if he hadn't walked into her cafe in Itaewon 3 days later. He was alone. No bodyguards. No entourage. Just a man in a black coat pushing open the door of a small cafe on a rainy Tuesday afternoon like any other customer. Sophie was behind the counter. She saw him and nearly shattered the mug in her hand. He sat at the corner table. He didn't look at the menu. He didn't look at her. He pulled out a book, opened it, and began reading as if this were something he did every day. Her legs felt like water as she approached his table. Can I get you something? She asked, and she deserved an award for how steady her voice came out. He looked up. Those eyes. God, those eyes. Recognition was there, but his expression gave nothing away. Black coffee. No sugar. She nodded. Walked away. Made the coffee with hands that were absolutely not trembling, except they absolutely were. She brought it to his table. Set it down. Turned to leave. Your wrist. She stopped. Turned back. He was looking at her hand, where the faint ghost of Sangwoo's grip still bruised her skin. It healed, she said. That's not what I asked. You didn't ask a question. That ghost of a movement at the corner of his mouth again. Not a smile. The memory of what a smile might look like if he ever allowed himself one. Does it still hurt? She looked at him. Up close, she could see what the dim restaurant hadn't shown her. Dark circles under his eyes, like a man who hadn't truly rested in years. A small scar bisecting his left eyebrow. The rigid tension in his jaw, his neck, his shoulders, as if his entire body was a fist that never unclenched. No, she said. It doesn't hurt anymore. Thank you. For what you did that night. A pause. Then, quieter than before, you're welcome. He looked back at his book. She walked away. He came back the next day. Same table. Same order. Same silence. But on the third day, when Sophie brought his coffee, there was already something on the table. A book. A first edition of James Baldwin's Giovanni's Room. Sophie stared at it. How did you know I love Baldwin? She asked. You have a quote tattooed on your inner wrist, he said, not looking up from his reading. The one Sangwoo grabbed. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. Baldwin. Sophie's breath caught. He had seen her tattoo. In the chaos of that night, with the broken glass and the blood and the shouting, he had read the words on her skin. Is this how Mafia bosses flirt? She asked. She didn't know where the courage came from. It just fell out of her mouth. He looked up. And this time, the ghost at the corner of his mouth came closer to being real. Not a full smile, but something alive. Something warm. I wouldn't know, he said. I've never tried before. Sophie bit her lip to keep from grinning and walked away holding a first edition that was probably worth more than everything she owned. On the 5th day, she caught him watching her. She was making a latte for another customer, laughing at something the barista had said, and she turned and there he was, his book forgotten on the table, his eyes on her with an expression that made her entire body go still. It wasn't desire. It wasn't hunger. It was wonder. The way a man who had lived in darkness his entire life might look at the sun if he ever stepped outside. She held his gaze. He didn't look away. For 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 7 seconds, neither of them moved. Then he looked away first. For the first time. And Sophie felt a shift in the universe so subtle that no one else in the cafe noticed it, but she felt it in her bones. Something had just changed between them. She grinned. He didn't see it. But she knew he felt it. On the 7th day, she set a different coffee in front of him. He looked at it. This isn't black coffee. It's a caramel macchiato. You need to try something sweet at least once in your life. He picked it up. Took a sip. His face did something extraordinary. It didn't quite grimace, because this man's face didn't do anything as undignified as grimacing, but it came close. Very close. Sophie burst out laughing. A real laugh. Full and warm and loud. His eyes snapped to her, and the look on his face, surprise, fascination, something almost like pain, told her that Ryu Seojin had never seen anything more beautiful than a woman laughing at him. He set the macchiato down. I'm keeping the black coffee. You're impossible. I've been told. She was still smiling when the cafe door flew open and 3 men walked in. Sangwoo. His scar. His hard eyes. His voice cutting through the warmth like a blade. Boss. We have a problem. Chairman Zhang hit the warehouse in Yongsan. 3 of our men are down. He took everything. The air in the cafe dropped 10 degrees. Seojin closed his book. Stood. Buttoned his coat with precise, mechanical movements. Call everyone in. We meet at the house in 1 hour. Sangwoo nodded but paused at the door. His eyes slid to Sophie. His lip curled. You should be more careful about where you spend your afternoons, boss. People are starting to talk. Seojin's head turned slowly. The look he gave Sangwoo could have stopped a bullet in midair. Let them. Then he looked at Sophie. Just for a moment. And in that moment, she saw something that scared her more than Sangwoo, more than the Mafia, more than any of it. She saw a man who was terrified of what he was feeling. Forget everything you just heard, he said softly. He walked out. The door closed behind him. The cafe felt empty. Sophie stood behind the counter with a caramel macchiato he'd never finish and a heart that was beating in a rhythm she didn't recognize. He didn't come back. 5 days. No black coat. No corner table. No dark eyes over the rim of a coffee cup. 5 days of Sophie checking the door every time it opened and feeling her stomach drop every time it wasn't him. She went home each night to her tiny apartment, sat on her bed, held his handkerchief to her face, and told herself she was being ridiculous. She was a waitress. He was a mafia boss. This wasn't a love story. This was a disaster waiting to happen. On the 6th night, she was walking home from Lumiere when a black car pulled alongside her. The window rolled down. Sangwoo. Get in. Absolutely not. Boss wants to see you. Sophie kept walking. The car kept pace. It's not a request, Sophie. She stopped. Stared at him through the window. If he wants to see me, he can come himself. I don't take orders from men who call me that kind of woman behind my back. Something flickered in Sangwoo's eyes. Surprise. Maybe shame. Probably neither. He can't come himself. He's been handling a situation. But he hasn't slept in 3 days, he won't eat, and the only word he's said to anyone that isn't a tactical command is your name. So get in the car, or I will pick you up and put you in it, and we both know you'd rather walk. Sophie got in the car. She hated that she got in the car. The drive climbed into the hills above Seoul. The city fell away below them, replaced by ancient pine trees and stone walls. The car stopped at a gate that opened onto a massive traditional Korean estate. Armed men at every entrance. Sophie was escorted through a courtyard, into a building that blended dark wood and modern glass, down a long hallway, and into a room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. And there, standing at the window with his back to her, his reflection transparent in the glass, was Ryu Seojin. He was wearing a black hanbok. The traditional lines of it made him look like a figure from a historical painting. Regal. Untouchable. Alone. You came, he said without turning. Your guard dog is very persuasive. The ghost at the corner of his mouth. There and gone. Why am I here, Seojin? The sound of his name in her mouth did something to the air. He turned. His eyes were darker than she had ever seen them. The circles underneath were deeper. He looked like a man who had been fighting a war on two fronts, one outside and one inside, and was losing both. Because I need to say something to you. And I need to say it once. And then you need to leave. She waited. He took a breath. I have lived my entire life behind walls. Not just these walls. Walls inside myself. My father was the head of the Ryu syndicate before me. He was killed when I was 17. Shot in front of me at a dinner table by a man he called his brother. My mother died of grief 6 months later. I inherited an empire of blood and betrayal, and I swore I would never let anyone close enough to destroy me the way my father was destroyed. He paused. I have never touched a woman. Not because I don't feel desire. I feel it. But I learned that desire makes you vulnerable. Attachment makes you weak. And weakness, in my world, is a death sentence. So I shut it down. All of it. For 13 years. And I told myself that was strength. His voice dropped. Then you kissed me in a parking lot. And 13 years of control shattered in 3 seconds. And I have been sitting in that cafe every day since, not for the coffee, but because being near you is the only time the screaming in my head stops. Sophie's eyes were burning. Her hands were fists at her sides. I brought you here to tell you that, he said. And to tell you to leave Seoul. Go home. Go back to America. Forget my name. Because the people around me will use you to destroy me, and I would rather lose you now than watch them take you later. The silence that followed was deafening. Sophie stared at him. Tears ran down her face. She didn't wipe them away. You brought me all the way up here, she said, her voice splintering, to tell me to leave? Yes. After saying all of that? Yes. After making me feel things I didn't even know I was capable of feeling? Sophie, no. She stepped forward. Her voice hardened. You do not get to do that. You don't get to crack me open and then tell me to walk away. That is not how this works. You don't understand my world, then show me. Don't you dare hide behind your world as an excuse to be a coward. The word hit him like a slap. His eyes widened. Nobody called Ryu Seojin a coward. Nobody in 13 years. People will die, he said, his voice rough. People die every day. I watched my mother die in a hospital bed in Atlanta when I was 19 years old, and I held her hand and I didn't look away. Don't talk to me about death. I'm not afraid of death. I'm afraid of this. She gestured between them. I'm afraid of walking away from this and spending the rest of my life wondering what it could have been. She took another step. Close now. Close enough to see his pulse slamming against the skin of his throat. I'm going to touch you, she whispered. And you can stop me. He didn't stop her. She raised her hand. Slowly. Her fingers hovered beside his jaw. She could feel the heat radiating from his skin. She gave him every chance to pull away, to step back, to rebuild every wall. He didn't move. Her fingers touched his jaw. He flinched. A full-body flinch, violent, like a man who had been struck. His eyes slammed shut. His breath tore out of him in a ragged, broken exhale. Look at me, she whispered. He opened his eyes. They were red. Glassy. This man, this king of the underworld, this weapon dressed in silk and silence, had tears in his eyes. It's okay, Sophie said. I've got you. She leaned up. Pressed her lips to his. This kiss was nothing like the parking lot. This kiss was soft. Slow. A question instead of a demand. An offering instead of a theft. And for one terrifying second, he was stone. Frozen. A man who didn't know how to receive what was being given. Then the stone cracked. His hands came up, shaking, hovering at her waist. They landed. And the sound he made against her mouth, low and shattered and ancient, like a door opening for the first time in 1,000 years, was the most human sound Sophie had ever heard. He kissed her back. Clumsy. Unpracticed. He didn't know the rhythm. But his hands tightened at her waist, and he pulled her closer, and the walls came crashing down, every single one, 13 years of stone and iron dissolving against the mouth of a woman who had nothing to her name except courage and a first edition of Baldwin. When they pulled apart, their foreheads were touching. Both of them breathing hard. Both of them trembling. "Don't tell me to leave again," she whispered. "I won't. Promise me." "I promise." She pulled back and looked at him. "Good. Now make me some tea. I know you have the good kind, and I've had a very long week." The weeks that followed were unlike anything either of them had experienced. Jean didn't do anything in half measures. When he let Sophie in, he let her all the way in. Every evening, a car came for her. Every evening, she sat in his study while he worked, her feet tucked under her on his leather couch, reading books from his library while he managed an empire from behind a mahogany desk. They talked for hours. He told her about his father's murder. The sound of the gun. The way his father's hand had reached across the table for him and fallen short. She told him about her mother. The chemo. The hospital. The way her mother had squeezed her hand at the end and whispered, "Baby, go find somewhere beautiful to live." She told him that was why she came to Korea. Because her mother told her to find somewhere beautiful. And she had. But she didn't tell him the rest of the sentence that had been forming in her heart for weeks. That she hadn't just found a beautiful place. She had found a beautiful man. One evening, she took his hand and pulled him out of the estate. He resisted. "Where are we going?" "My world. You've shown me yours. It's my turn." She took him to Itaewon. To the small African restaurant run by a Nigerian woman named Auntie Chioma who had been feeding Sophie since her first month in Korea. Auntie Chioma took one look at Jean, tall and rigid and out of place in his 10 million won coat, and burst out laughing. "Sophie. You brought a man. And he looks like he's never eaten jollof rice in his life. Sit down, son. I'm about to change your world." Jean sat. He ate jollof rice with his chopsticks because he didn't know how to eat with his hands. Sophie laughed so hard she cried. Auntie Chioma shook her head and put a spoon in front of him. "You're doing great, sweetie," Auntie Chioma said, patting his shoulder. He flinched at the touch, but he didn't pull away. Progress. After dinner, Sophie took him to a small bar where a live band was playing Afrobeats. She pulled him onto the dance floor. He stood like a statue. "I don't dance," he said. "You didn't kiss either until 3 weeks ago. Look how fast you learned." He stared at her. Then something happened that Sophie would remember for the rest of her life. Ryu Jean, the untouchable, the coldest man in Korea, laughed. It was short. Rough. Like a sound his body had forgotten how to make. But it was real. And Sophie's heart nearly stopped beating. She put her hands on his waist and showed him how to move. He was terrible. Absolutely terrible. Stiff and offbeat and completely lost. His men, who were stationed outside the bar because they followed him everywhere, watched through the window with expressions of pure existential crisis. Their boss was dancing. In public. With a woman. The world was ending. But Sophie was laughing, and Jean was looking at her the way a drowning man looks at the surface of the water, and nothing else mattered. She taught him about her hair one night at the estate. She was sitting on the floor between his knees while he sat on the couch, and she guided his hands to her locks. "This is my crown," she said. "Every lock has a story. This culture, my culture, we carry our history in our hair." He touched her locks with the kind of reverence other men reserved for sacred objects. His fingers moved slowly, carefully, learning the weight and texture. "It's beautiful," he said. "You're beautiful." The words were simple. Unadorned. He said them like facts. Like scientific observations. And somehow that made them the most romantic words Sophie had ever heard. But not every moment was tender. 3 weeks into their relationship, Jean took her to a charity gala at the Shilla Hotel. It was the first time they appeared together publicly in his world. Sophie wore a black gown. Her locks were pinned up with gold. She looked stunning. She knew she looked stunning. Every head turned when they walked in. Some with admiration. Some with curiosity. Some with something uglier. They were seated at a table with 3 other couples. One of the women, the wife of a construction magnate named Director Lim, stared at Sophie for the first 20 minutes without speaking. Then, while Sophie was mid-conversation with another guest, the woman turned to her husband and said, in Korean, clearly enough for the table to hear, "I didn't realize they were letting the help sit with the guests now. Is this some kind of diversity initiative? Or did Ryu Seojin lose a bet?" The table went silent. Director Lim shifted uncomfortably. 2 other guests looked down at their plates. Sophie felt the words land. Each one. She had armor for this, thick armor, strong armor, but they always found the cracks. She kept her face composed. Her hands folded in her lap. She would not give this woman the satisfaction of seeing her bleed. But Seojin saw it. He saw the microscopic flinch. The way her jaw tightened. The way her fingers pressed harder together under the table. He set down his glass. He turned to the woman. And when he spoke, his voice had the temperature of liquid nitrogen. "Mrs. Lim. The woman sitting beside me speaks 3 languages, 1 more than you. She has survived more in 24 years than you have endured in your entire cushioned existence. And the man sitting beside you, your husband, Director Lim, currently owes my organization 11 billion won in construction loans that I can call in at any moment." He paused. "Let that settle. I will not be calling those loans in tonight, because I am having a pleasant evening and I don't enjoy ruining people over appetizers. But if you speak to or about the woman I am with in anything less than the tone you would use to address a queen, I will financially dismantle your husband's company before the dessert course arrives. And I will do it from this chair. With 1 phone call. While maintaining eye contact with you." Mrs. Lim's face drained of color. Director Lim began sweating profusely. "Do we understand each other?" Seojin asked pleasantly. Mrs. Lim nodded. She didn't speak again for the rest of the evening. Under the table, Sophie's hand found Seojin's. She squeezed. He squeezed back. And for the first time in her life, Sophie Bennett understood what it felt like to have someone fight for her. Now listen, if this story has your heart in a chokehold right now, I need you to drop a like, leave a comment telling me your favorite moment so far, and make sure you're subscribed because what's about to happen next is going to destroy you. Let's keep going. 3 days after the gala, Baek Soo-ah arrived. She walked through the gates of the estate like she owned every stone, every tree, every molecule of air. Chanel suit. Perfect makeup. A beauty so cold and calculated it could cut glass. Sophie was in the garden, reading Baldwin on a stone bench, when the shadow fell over her. "So you're the one." Soo-ah's Korean was razor sharp. Her smile was sharper. "Everyone's been talking about you. The waitress who tamed the untouchable." Sophie closed the book slowly. Looked up. "Can I help you?" "I'm Baek Soo-ah. My father is Assemblyman Baek Won-shik. And I've been engaged to Seojin since I was 16 years old." The word engaged hit Sophie like a bullet. Her face must have shown it, because Soo-ah's smile widened into something cruel and satisfied. "He didn't tell you." "Of course he didn't. Why would he? You're his experiment, Sophie. His little rebellion. Do you honestly think a man like Ryu Seojin is going to build a future with an American waitress? A black woman with no family, no money, no status? In this world? Be serious." Sophie's hands gripped the book. Her knuckles ached. "If you have concerns about your arrangement, I suggest you take them up with Seojin." "Oh, I will. But I wanted to see you first." Woman to woman. Soo-ah leaned forward. "I'm not your enemy. I'm your mirror. And if you look closely enough, you'll see the truth. He will never choose you. Not publicly. Not permanently. Men like him don't marry women like you. They enjoy you for a while, and then they come home to women like me. She stood. Smoothed her skirt. Have a plane ticket ready, Sophie. You're going to need it. She walked away. Sophie sat in the garden for a long time. Her heart was cracking, and she was furious at herself for letting it crack, because she knew, that Suwa was trying to break her. And it was working. When Seo Jin found her an hour later, he read her face in 1 second flat. What happened? Are you engaged to Baek Suwa? The question detonated between them. Who told you that? She did. She was here. In your garden. Introducing herself as your fiancé. His expression turned to ice. It was an arrangement between our fathers. Before mine was killed. I never agreed to it. I have never wanted her. I have never touched her. She is nothing to me. Then why didn't you tell me? Because it's irrelevant. It is not irrelevant. Sophie stood. Her voice cracked like a whip. I am standing in the middle of your world, Seo Jin. A world where people grab me and insult me and call me that kind of woman behind my back. And now I find out there's a whole engagement you never mentioned? What else are you hiding? What else don't I know? There is nothing else. How am I supposed to believe that? How am I supposed to trust you when you keep entire relationships from me? She is not a relationship. She is a political arrangement I never consented to. I don't care what she is. I care that you didn't tell me. Because that tells me you didn't think I could handle it. Or worse, you didn't think I deserved to know. He stepped toward her. Sophie, no. She stepped back. And the look on her face, not anger anymore, but something worse, something tired and sad and familiar, the look of a woman who was used to being the last to know, the first to be left, the one who was never quite important enough to fight for, stopped him cold. I think I should go home, she said quietly. Sophie, don't, I need to think. Please don't follow me. She turned and walked out of the garden, through the estate, past the armed men who watched her with confused expressions, and out the gate. She walked all the way down the hill. She didn't call a car. She walked in her sneakers down winding roads in the dark until she reached the main street and flagged a taxi. She went back to Yeonam-dong. She sat on her bed. She pulled out her suitcase. And she started packing. Because Sophie Bennett had learned a long time ago that when something hurt this much, it was time to go. She had her bag half packed when she heard it. A knock at the door. She ignored it. Another knock. Harder. Then his voice. Sophie. Open the door. Go away, Seo Jin. I can't. Why not? Because you told me not to follow you, and I tried. I sat in that garden for 4 minutes and 37 seconds after you left. And then I got in the car because 4 minutes and 37 seconds without you was already unbearable, and I refused to find out what a lifetime feels like. She stood in her tiny apartment, suitcase open on the bed, tears streaming down her face, staring at the door. I ended the arrangement, he said through the wood. 20 minutes ago. I called Assemblyman Beck and dissolved it. He threatened me. I don't care. His daughter threatened me. I don't care. I will burn every political alliance I have. I will set fire to every bridge and every deal and every handshake. I don't care about any of it. His voice broke. She heard it break. I care about you. I care about your laugh and your tattoo and the way you made me drink that terrible macchiato and the way you taught me to dance even though I have no rhythm and the way your locks feel between my fingers. I care about the fact that you are the only person who has ever called me a coward and been absolutely right. Silence. Please open the door, Sophie. Please. I have never said please in my adult life. I am saying it now. For you. She opened the door. He was standing in the hallway of her tiny apartment building. The most powerful man in Seoul's underground, in a hallway that smelled like cooking oil and laundry detergent, with red eyes and a cracked voice and his pride in pieces at his feet. He looked at her. At the suitcase behind her. At the tears on her face. You were leaving, he said. I was thinking about it. Don't. Give me a reason not to. He stepped forward. Took her face in his hands. Hands that still trembled at the contact but held on anyway. Held on like she was oxygen. I am not a good man, he said. I have done terrible things. I will do more. My world is violence and betrayal and blood, and I cannot promise you safety. But I can promise you this, I will never hide anything from you again. I will never make you feel like you don't belong. And I will spend every day of my life making sure you know that you are not an experiment, not a rebellion, not a phase. You are the reason I am standing in this hallway saying words I didn't know I had. He leaned his forehead against hers. Stay. Please stay. Sophie closed her eyes. Tears fell. She whispered, "You're getting tears on my floor." He laughed. That same short, rough, rusty sound. And she kissed him. In her tiny apartment in Yeonam-dong. And it tasted like forgiveness. The weeks that followed were war. Not between them. Between Seo-jin and the world. Assemblyman Beck retaliated exactly as expected. Political pressure. Financial attacks. Media whispers. Seo-jin handled each one with surgical precision and zero emotion. His organization held firm. His allies stood. And the message was clear, the untouchable had made his choice, and anyone who challenged it would regret the attempt. But Soo-ah was not finished. She had never been rejected in her life. The humiliation was a wound that festered, and from that wound grew something poisonous and patient. She reached out to Chairman Jang Tae-soo, the rival who had been circling Seo-jin's territory for years, and she offered him the one thing he had never had. A weakness to exploit. Sophie was leaving the cafe after an afternoon shift when two men grabbed her. Van. Hood. Needle in the neck. Darkness. She fought. She bit one of them so hard she tasted blood. She drove her knee into another's stomach and heard the air leave his body. But there were too many hands, and the sedative was already pulling her under, and the last thing she saw before the world went black was the Seoul skyline disappearing through the van's back window. She woke up in a concrete room. Single bulb. Zip ties cutting into her wrists. Head splitting from the drugs. The door opened. Chairman Jang Tae-soo walked in. 60s. Silver hair. A smile that made her skin crawl. Miss Bennett. Thank you for joining me. Who are you? A businessman with a proposal for your boyfriend. He's going to kill you, Sophie said flatly. You know that, right? Whatever you think this gets you, it gets you dead. Jang smiled wider. I'm counting on his anger. Angry men make mistakes. And mistakes are how empires fall. He sent the video at 11:47 p.m. Sophie, bound and bruised on screen. A voice off camera, 48 hours. Surrender your territory south of the river, or she comes back in pieces. The phone cracked in Seo-jin's hand. Literally cracked. The screen shattered under the force of his grip. His study door burst open. Lieutenants rushed in. Find her. His voice was unrecognizable. Something primal. Something ancient. The sound of a man discovering that the thing he feared most in the world had just happened. Every man. Every resource. Every contact. Find her now. And I want Jang alive. He paused. I need him alive. Because what I'm going to do to him requires a pulse. Nobody moved for one full second. Then they moved very, very fast. The next 20 hours were controlled chaos. Seo-jin didn't sleep. Didn't eat. Didn't sit. He stood in the command center of his estate surrounded by screens and maps and the controlled panic of an organization mobilizing for war. And in the middle of it, he made one call. To Baek Soo-ah. She answered instantly. I know you're involved, he said. No greeting. No warmth. Just truth. Silence. You told Jang about Sophie. You gave him the opening. More silence. Then, softly, she's not right for you, Seo-jin. You helped a man kidnap the woman I love. You put her in a concrete room with zip ties on her wrists. And you want to talk about what's right for me? I loved you since I was 16, you don't love me, Suwa. You love the idea of me. The title. The power. The name. You have never once looked at me the way Sophie looks at me. Like I'm a person instead of a position. His voice went flat. Final. Tell me where Jang is holding her. Now. Or I will release every piece of evidence I have on your father's corruption, and I will make sure the world knows that Baek Suwa conspired to kidnap and potentially murder an innocent woman because she couldn't handle rejection. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Then Suwa gave him the address. A warehouse complex in Incheon. Seo-jin took 20 men. He went in first. The warehouse was dark, industrial, defended by a dozen armed guards who were well-trained and well-positioned. They were not well enough. Seo-jin moved through them like a force of nature. Precise. Brutal. Silent. He hadn't held a weapon in 3 years, but his body remembered. Every technique. Every instinct. Every lesson learned in blood and pain since he was 17 years old. His men secured rooms behind him. But he was always ahead. Always first through the door. Always the closest to danger. Because danger was between him and Sophie, and nothing on earth was going to stay between him and Sophie. He found her in a basement room. Tied to a chair. Bruised. Bleeding from a cut on her cheekbone. But her eyes were open. Clear. Defiant. She saw him come through the door, blood on his shirt, gun in hand, chest heaving, and she looked at him with those eyes, those extraordinary eyes, and said, "You took your time." He crossed the room in 3 strides. Cut her restraints. She fell forward into him, and he caught her and held her so tight he could feel every heartbeat, hers and his, beating in syncopation, beating together, beating as one. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "Stop apologizing and take me home." He kissed her. Hard. Tasting like blood and tears and the devastating relief of almost. Then he picked her up. Carried her in his arms through the warehouse, past his men who stood aside in silence, out into the cold night air. He placed her in the car. Told the driver to take her to the estate. Then he turned and walked back inside. Chairman Jang was found hiding in an upper office. Seo-jin's men dragged him to the main floor. Forced him to his knees. Seo-jin stood over him. "You touched what's mine," he said. Jang was shaking. "Business, Seo-jin. Just business. We can negotiate." "No. We can't." What happened next does not need detail. But Chairman Jang's organization ceased to exist that night. Every piece of it. And the message that echoed through Seoul's underworld was simple. The untouchable was no longer untouchable because he had no weaknesses. He was untouchable because God helped the man who targeted the one weakness he had. Sang-woo was dealt with the next morning. The confrontation was quiet. Devastating. 2 decades of brotherhood ending in a study that smelled like cedar and regret. "How long?" Seo-jin asked. 6 months. "Since the cafe." "Why?" Sang-woo's voice cracked. "Because I gave you 20 years. I was your brother. And then she showed up and I became nothing." Seo-jin listened. Acknowledged. Then cut. Clean and final. "You put her in danger. You let them hurt her. For that, there is no forgiveness. You have 1 hour to leave Seoul. If I see you again, the mercy I'm showing today will not exist." Sang-woo bowed. Called him young. Walked out. The door closed. And Seo-jin stood alone with the weight of a dead friendship and the terrible arithmetic of love, what it costs, what it takes, what it demands you sacrifice. But Sophie wasn't finished. 2 days after the rescue, still bruised, still sore, she walked into the Beck family's residence alone. No Seo-jin. No bodyguards. Just Sophie Bennett from Atlanta, Georgia, in jeans and sneakers and her mother's necklace. Suwa was in the living room. She looked up when Sophie walked in, and for the first time, her composure cracked. Fear flickered behind those perfect eyes. "What are you doing here?" Sophie sat down across from her. Calm. Steady. Burning. "I came to say something to you. Not through Seojin. Not through lawyers. From me to you." Sua's jaw tightened. "You didn't lose him to me," Sophie said. "You never had him. You can't lose something that was never yours. You spent 16 years building a fantasy around a man who never looked at you the way he looks at me. And when reality didn't match your fantasy, you didn't grieve. You didn't grow. You conspired to have me kidnapped. To have me hurt. Maybe killed." She leaned forward. "And I'm still here. Look at me, Suwa. Look at my face. The bruises from your decision are still on my skin, and I am still sitting in front of you. Still breathing. Still standing. Still wearing his ring on my finger by the end of this year, God willing." Sua's eyes were glistening. "He chose me," Sophie said. "Not because I'm perfect. Not because I'm powerful. Not because I come from money or politics or the right family. He chose me because I walked into his world with nothing but myself, and that was enough. That was enough for a man who has everything." She stood. "I don't hate you, Suwa. I pity you. Because you wasted the best years of your life waiting for a man to love you, and you never once asked yourself if you even loved him or just loved what he represented. That's the difference between us. I didn't fall in love with the untouchable. I fell in love with Seojin. The man who drinks black coffee and reads Camus and can't dance to save his life and flinches when you touch his face because the world taught him that tenderness was weakness." She walked to the door. Stopped. Turned back one last time. "Don't come near us again. Don't contact us. Don't even whisper our names. Because next time, I won't come alone. And Seojin is far less forgiving than I am." She walked out. Head high. Heart pounding. Hands steady. Sophie Bennett had never felt more powerful in her life. 1 month later, she stood in the bedroom of the estate, looking at herself in a full-length mirror. White hanbok. Hand embroidered with gold thread. Her locks were pulled up and woven with delicate gold pins that Seojin had commissioned specifically for her, designed to honor both Korean tradition and African elegance. She looked like a queen. She felt like she was about to pass out. A knock at the door. Yuna's tear-streaked face appeared. Pink hanbok. Red eyes. Already sobbing. "It's time," Yuna blubbered. Sophie laughed. Took a breath. Walked out. Down the hallway. Into the courtyard. 100 people stood under a canopy of white peonies and candlelight. His men in formal black. Her friends from the cafe. The women from her language class. Auntie Chioma in a stunning Nigerian wrapper, already crying and fanning herself. And Mama Grace, the elderly Korean woman from Sophie's apartment building who called her, my American granddaughter, was clutching a handkerchief and wailing with joy. At the end of the aisle, under an arch of white flowers, stood Ryu Seojin. Black hanbok. Silver embroidery. Jaw set. Spine straight. Every inch the leader, the king, the untouchable. But his eyes. God, his eyes. Soft. Open. Terrified. Beautiful. He looked at Sophie the way the ocean looks at the shore, like he had been moving toward her his whole life. She walked toward him. Every step felt like flying. When she reached him, he extended his hand. She took it. His fingers trembled around hers. Still. After everything. Touch was still a language his body was learning. But he held on. He held on like she was the only real thing in the world. The ceremony was theirs. Vows in Korean and English. A sharing of wine. A bow to the ancestors. And when the officiant pronounced them married, Seojin took Sophie's face in his hands, Those hands that had built empires and wielded weapons and signed death warrants and now held the only thing they were ever truly meant to hold, and he kissed her. Not gently. Not carefully. He kissed her like a man who had been drowning for 13 years and had finally learned to breathe. The courtyard erupted. His men cheered. Yuna collapsed into sobs. Auntie Chioma shouted something in Igbo that made the Nigerian guests scream with laughter. And Mama Grace threw her handkerchief in the air and yelled, "That's my granddaughter." Sophie laughed against his lips. Tears ran down her face. Her heart was so full she thought it might shatter. He pulled back just enough to look at her. "Mrs. Ryu. Mr. Ryu. I need to tell you something." "What?" His eyes darkened. Not with anger. With intensity. With 13 years of suppressed desire and longing and need. Everyone is leaving in 1 hour. And when they do, I intend to begin our wedding night. I have no experience. But I have imagined this moment every single night since the first time you touched my face. I have thought about the way your skin feels under my hands. The sound you make when I kiss your neck. The way your body moves against mine. I have thought about these things until they consumed me. His voice dropped to a whisper that only she could hear. So I hope you're ready. Because I am done waiting. Sophie's entire body flushed. Her cheeks burned. Her breath caught. She leaned up on her toes, pressed her lips to his ear, and whispered, "I've been ready since I kissed you in that parking lot. Don't keep me waiting." His grip on her waist tightened. His jaw clenched. He turned to his lieutenant and said, "Everyone leaves in 30 minutes. The lieutenant blinked. "Sir, you said 1 hour, I changed my mind." The guests left. The candles burned low. The estate settled into silence. And behind the closed doors of their bedroom, two people who had spent their entire lives building walls made the decision to tear down every single one. He was nervous. She could feel it in the tremor of his hands as they hovered at the ties of her hanbok. In the way his breathing changed, faster, shallower, when her fingers found the buttons of his jacket. "Hey," she whispered, taking his hands. Steadying them. "Look at me. It's just us. It's just me." He looked at her. And the vulnerability in his eyes, the rawness, the openness, the complete surrender of a man who had never surrendered to anything, took her breath away. "I don't know how to do this," he said. "Then let me show you." She guided his hands. Slowly. Patiently. She unwrapped herself for him like a gift, and he watched with an expression of such reverent concentration that she felt more seen, more known, more desired in that moment than she had ever felt in her life. When his hands finally touched her bare skin, he inhaled sharply. His fingers traced the curve of her shoulder. The line of her collarbone. The geography of a body he was learning for the first time. "You're shaking," she murmured. "I know. Are you afraid?" "Terrified." "Of what?" "That I'll wake up and this will be a dream. That you're not real. That I don't deserve this." She took his face in her hands. "You're awake. I'm real. And you deserve every single second of this." She kissed him. Deep. Slow. And his hands stopped shaking. Their bodies met like two halves of a sentence that had been separated for too long. He was gentle. Almost painfully gentle. Treating her body like something sacred, something holy, something that would break if he held it too hard. She whispered his name against his skin. He whispered hers back, over and over, like a prayer he had just learned. And in the silence between those whispers, something was built that was bigger than both of them. Bigger than his empire. Bigger than her past. Bigger than every wall and every rule and every scar that had kept them apart. Home. They built a home. Not from stone or wood or money. From skin and breath and the revolutionary act of two broken people choosing, in the face of everything, to be whole together. Afterward, they lay tangled in sheets that smelled like jasmine and skin. Her head on his chest. His fingers moving through her locks with the tenderness of a man who had learned that gentleness was not weakness but the highest form of strength. Co. Jean. What happens now? Now we live, Sophie. Together. In a world that was never designed for people like us. And we fight for this every single day. She lifted her head. Looked at him. You know I'm going to make you try jollof rice at least once a week. I know. And Auntie Chioma is going to come over and reorganize your kitchen. I know. And I'm going to teach our kids to dance to Afrobeats, and they're going to be better at it than you. He went still. Our kids. She smiled. Our kids. He pulled her closer. Kissed the top of her head. Sophie Ryu, he said. And her name in his mouth, in his voice, sounded like the first word of a new language. A language made of coffee and courage and parking lot kisses and the stubborn, radical, impossible belief that love, real love, doesn't care about rules. 6 months later, Sophie stood on the balcony of their estate, looking out over Seoul. The city sparkled below like a constellation that had fallen to earth. Her hand rested on her stomach. Seo Jin came up behind her. Wrapped his arms around her waist. Rested his chin on her head. He did this every evening now. The man who couldn't be touched to become a man who couldn't stop touching. Holding her hand during meetings. Kissing her temple in front of his lieutenants. Pulling her into his lap in his study while reviewing contracts, to the permanent embarrassment of his entire organization. I need to tell you something, she said. Then tell me. She took his hand from her waist and placed it on her stomach. He went still. That same held breath stillness from the first time she touched his jaw. The world shifting, axis tilting, everything is different now kind of still. Sophie. I'm pregnant, Seo Jin. We're having a baby. She watched the emotions cross his face. Shock. Fear. Disbelief. And then, breaking through like dawn through 13 years of darkness, joy. Pure, blinding, radiant joy. He dropped to his knees. The most powerful man in Seoul's underworld, on his knees on a balcony, pressing his forehead against his wife's stomach, weeping. I will protect you, he whispered. Both of you. With everything I have. Everything I am. Sophie ran her fingers through his hair. Cried with him. Laughed with him. Held him while he held her. Two people who had started with nothing but themselves, building everything. He looked up at her. And his eyes were the eyes of a man reborn. Not untouchable. Not unreachable. Just a man. In love. About to be a father. Living a life he never dared to dream. And in the shadows of the hallway, watching through the crack in the door, stood a figure neither of them saw. Broad-shouldered. Scarred. Familiar. No Sangwoo had not left Seoul. No Sangwoo had been watching. Waiting. Planning. And in the darkness, his lips moved around a single word. Soon. If this story grabbed you by the heart and didn't let go, if you felt every kiss, every tear, every moment of this journey, then do me a favor right now. Hit that subscribe button. Smash that like. And drop a comment below telling me what you want to happen next, because Sangwoo is back, this story is far from over, and part 2 is going to break you. Share this with someone who needs a love story that reminds them they deserve to be chosen. I love you all. Stay blessed. And I'll see you in the next one.